Hello and welcome back to J.P.s World of Wrestling. I am your man J.P. Now, last time I talked about my memories of just wrestling in general, but today I'm going to give you another top 5 list. And on top of that, I'm going to give you 5 honorable mentions, so it's almost like 2 top 5 lists. Now, besides 1 and 2 on this list, these are not really in any particular order. They're just in order of what I thought of them. But today's top 5 list is gimmicks that actually worked in the WWF. That's right. These were guys that wrestled as a specific character, but that character worked. And it worked for the person and the guy that the character was. The guy made the character work and accepted the gimmick and embraced it and used it and became a memorable character. So I'm going to start with number 5, Yokozuna. That's right, one of the best big men, if not maybe the best big man ever in the history of the WWF. That's right, Yokozuna was billed as kind of a Japanese sumo wrestler, even though he was actually Samoan. In fact, he's related to a lot of the Samoan guys like Roman Reigns and Rikishi and the Usos and the Wild Samoans and all those guys. Some of those guys are modern wrestlers. Some of you may not know those guys, but trust me, Yokozuna is related to him. But man, his gimmick worked. I mean, his moves were devastating. His wrestling style was convincing. For a big man, he could move around really well. He could do like kicks, crescent kicks to the chin. His leg drops were devastating. His bonsai drop was just lights out. Nobody got up from it. And he was just an amazing spectacle. He was an amazing guy to watch. And I loved it. And I miss Yoko. And I'm sad that he left this world so soon. And it was way too soon. He was way too young to go. Anyway, so number 4 is Tatanka. That's right, the Native American wrestler known as Tatanka. Now, I think this gimmick worked because, yes, he was a Native American, but that's not just a gimmick that he was playing. He actually was is a Native American, and he just goes by the name Tatanka because that's a Native American name. And so he had, excuse me, he had, the Native American garb. He had the beads and he had the tomahawk and he had the sort of the loincloth and the boots. He had like the boots with all the Native American symbols and all on it and everything. And when he first came in, he would dye the top of his hair red, to symbolize the blood of all the Native Americans of his ancestors or whatever. And he had all these like really for example his chops, the chops that he did, like the knife edge chops to the chest. He really laid those in, and I am very glad I was never on the receiving end of a Tatanka chop. But he was also like chop the forehead, and he would come off the ropes and chop the forehead, and he did a lot of really cool like Native American moves and all that. And I always thought he was cool. I always thought Tatanka was cool. The only issue I had with Tatanka, but it wasn't his fault, was that he wasn't really in any really strong feuds. I mean, he was in a feud with Ludwig Borga, but Ludwig Borga left the WWF before that could come to fruition, before they could really lock horns. But then he had kind of a feud with Lex Luger right before Tatanka joined the $1 Million Corporation. But other than that, he didn't really have a lot of feuds. I mean, actually, he kind of had a feud with Rick the Model Martel, which was cool. I liked that feud. And he had kind of a feud with IRS briefly on Monday Night Raw, where IRS stole the headdress of Tatanka, saying, "Oh, you better pay your taxes on this, or else I won't give it back." And then Rick Martel stole an eagle feather from Tatanka, which ignited their rivalry. So I guess he did have some rivalries. But anyway, I liked Tatanka. I thought he was cool. He's still very much around. He's a good dad. He goes to all of his kids' things, and his son's a champion amateur wrestler, and I love Tatanka. Number 3, IRS. That's right, Urban R. Shyster, aka Mike Rotunda. Um, yeah, IRS. That gimmick worked. You would think that a gimmick like a taxman turned wrestler would not work as well, but no, Mike Rotunda, since he's very very good at what he does, he made a convincing character out of IRS, and because he was really good as a wrestler, and technically he was a great wrestler, he made the gimmick work, and it actually lasted for several years, and IRS worked. What can I say? So number 2 was not a WWF guy; he was a WCW guy, but the gimmick really really worked, and it was one of the only gimmicks that WCW had at the time. But it's Sting, aka the Stinger, aka Steve Borden. Yes, that's right. Sting was a gimmick that actually worked, and it still works because Sting is still active. But I think there was a couple times where Sting was voted the most popular wrestler by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and Sting was he's good. He was a good gimmick, and it, like I said, it actually worked, and he had some big memorable feuds, including one with Ric Flair, Lex Luger, the Great Muta. He had some big feuds and some big matches, and thumbs up to Sting. So number 1 on my top 5 gimmicks that actually worked, of course, is The Undertaker. That's right, The Undertaker. When he first came into the WWF, I have to admit, this guy terrified me. He was scary. Just the way he would kind of sit up, and the way he would always have his eyes open and he wouldn't blink. And he would have like these dark circles under his eyes, and he had this long red mullet. But slowly but surely he grew his hair out long to where his hair was always kind of in his face. And, he went from the gray gloves to the purple gloves, and at one point he had a mask on his face, and he went through an evolution. Undertaker, he evolved with the times. He was during the Attitude Era, he was during the Ruthless Aggression Era, and all the way up until just a few years ago when he finally retired. But The Undertaker is definitely a gimmick, probably the most successful gimmick of all time in the WWF. So now I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions. Now there's 5 of them here, so I'm going to kind of try to go through these a little bit quickly just because, I don't know. So I'm going to start with Kane. That's right, Kane, portrayed by Glenn Jacobs. Kane came into the WWF as Isaac Yankem, the evil dentist. And then that gimmick didn't really work. It was kind of stupid. So then after Kevin Nash and Scott Hall left the WWF, that was Razor Ramon and Diesel, WWF did this thing where they were going to, we still own the rights to Kevin or Diesel and Razor Ramon. So they brought in these 2 fake wrestlers as Razor Ramon and Diesel. And Glenn Jacobs portrayed the fake Diesel. And so that was only a short time deal. But then they brought him back as The Undertaker's long lost brother, Kane. And that gimmick lasted for a really long time, and it definitely worked. And so Kane was kind of started right just before the Attitude Era started, all the way through the Attitude Era, all the way up until just a few years ago when he finally retired. So, and he started off wearing a mask, and at one point they took the mask off of him, then they put it back on him. I don't know, but anyway, Kane was a character that worked. So then, the next 2 were kind of ones that kind of go together. Razor Ramon and Diesel. Both of those guys were characters at work. They kind of came in during kind of a slow part or slow era in the WWF. So I think they worked just because all of the other gimmicks at the time were just awful. But Razor Ramon, of course, Scott Hall, Diesel, Kevin Nash. I just talked about the fake Diesel, but the real Diesel was Kevin Nash. Diesel was the WWF champion for almost a year, or maybe it was a little bit over a year. Then Razor Ramon was the Intercontinental champion for, I don't know, I think 3 times. And both of those gimmicks worked. Diesel, I'm not sure if he was supposed to be like a truck driver or an actual truck. I don't know. But Razor Ramon, the character was based off of Al Pacino's character from Scarface. And so that's kind of where that character came from. But both of those gimmicks worked real well. I loved Razor Ramon. I loved Diesel. Well, I liked Diesel. I didn't really love him, but I thought he was okay. So then I'm going to talk about Rick the Model Martel. That's right, Rick the Model. Now, after Rick Martel parted ways with Tito Santana from Strikeforce, they made him a model, like a male model. And he would come out wearing like pink tennis gear and or bright blue tennis gear, and he would have this, canister of his cologne Arrogance, which was crucial in his feud with Jake the Snake Roberts. He had a feud with Shawn Michaels, but all in all, he had a feud with Tatanka, and he was just basically just a solid worker. He was a solid wrestler. He was fun to watch it, and his character was fun. Just the way he would portray himself, and it was a gimmick that worked, and it worked in spades. So then, the last guy I'm going to talk about is Mankind, also known as Mick Foley, also known as Cactus Jack, also known as Dude Love, and really any of these gimmicks you can lump in here with this one. But this one, I think, worked because for once there was an opponent for The Undertaker that was actually believable. For once there was a character that you thought, wow, this guy could actually beat The Undertaker. And so the way that they portrayed him was he was this guy, this mentally unstable guy that wore kind of a mask, and he loved to feel pain, and he would put his body through all this pain, and he would, do crazy things in matches, like do cannonball dives into steel steps and use barbed wire and stuff. It was just crazy, but he was a character that worked, a gimmick that worked, and all of Mick Foley's gimmicks worked. So, Mankind. Okay, so that's my top 5 list for gimmicks that actually worked in wrestling. Not mostly WWF, but there's one WCW guy. But anyway, those are gimmicks that actually worked. Now, I like doing the cheesy gimmicks, the terrible gimmicks, just because those are just fun and funny, and it's fun to make fun of them. But I don't want to come across as every single gimmick that ever was terrible. No, some of them worked, and these are examples of ones that did work. So anyway, that is going to do it for this video. If you are new here, you can go ahead and like the video. That helps me out. You can subscribe to the channel. That also helps me out. You can share it on social media, and I will see you next time.